Hi, so hello and welcome to another one of these monthly lives that I've been doing all year, talking to Ukrainian teachers of English. As you may have noticed, or maybe you didn't, I'm not sure which one's worse. I've been off Instagram for pretty much the whole of this month. I've been away in Ireland for just over 3 weeks and then a couple of days up in mid Wales. And as you can see, I've returned looking refreshed and relaxed and raring to go for the academic year ahead. I hope all of you, wherever you are, whatever you've been doing, have managed to get a bit of a break over August. I know the world doesn't always make it easy for everyone to do this. In a few minutes, I'm hoping I'm going to be joined by Natalie. I'll wait and see when she arrives. Sooner or later, I'm going to end up doing one of these lives where I say something like that, and the person I'm supposed to be joined by won't turn up, and you'll all be sitting here watching me rabbiting away to myself, wondering what you're doing here and what I'm doing here. But hopefully she'll be with us. Thank you everyone for joining. I can see Natalie's just joined. Hey Natalie, just ask to go live, I think is how it works, or I ask you to go live. Let me see. Yeah, I think you have to ask me actually. So yeah, just ask to go live and we'll get started. Thank you to everyone joining us. Let me see, I think that's Natalie there. Oh, what's happened there?
Hello.
Hey, hello Natalie. Hi,
Hi.
thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm also nice, although I'm a little bit, panic-stricken because I'm so excited to be here. But it's
Thank you. You are.
because, for me, you're like a rock star, basically, because sorry.
It's okay.
And yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you, and I hope it's not too nerve-wracking or too stressful for you.
Oh, that's fine.
And have you managed a bit of a break at all over the summer at all, Natalie, or have you been working right through?
Actually, no. I'm going to have some break from my job next week. Yeah, but I had to work the whole summer, unfortunately.
Okay. How much of a break are you going to get?
Only a week.
Okay. And you're in Kyiv at the moment, yeah?
Yes, yes, that's true.
And how is it at the moment? Has it been quieter or? Oh, 1 minute. I think you've frozen. Oh, let's see what happens there. This is like my experience of teaching online, where people keep freezing. I'll just wait a minute and see what happens there with Natalie. I'm hoping it's a temporary glitch. Oh, she'd like to go live again. Let's try. Hello, hello, hello. What's happening there? Hey, you're back.
Yeah, hi again. I don't know what happened. Something maybe with connection. I don't know.
I'm very used to this. So yeah, how is it at the moment in Kyiv?
It's fine. Basically, it's fine. Like people are living their lives, people are trying to mind their own business. So except if we don't take into account these constant air raid sirens that we have almost every night during the day, like people are just doing their own things. That's all.
And what do you do when you hear the air raid sirens at the moment? Are you at the stage of just ignoring it, or are you down in the basement, or
It depends. It depends on the situation. When the air raid siren sounds just because some military plane was just took off somewhere in Russia. So usually we don't go anywhere. We just continue working. But if we hear that, like we constantly follow the news on Telegram.
Connections. 1 minute. Let's try again. I'll just wait 1 second for Natalie to reconnect. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Sorry, everyone watching. Let's try again. Hello, hello again. Hey.
I'm sorry, I guess again some kind of issues with the internet.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's kind of understandable. So yeah, you were saying it depends on what kind of alert you're getting, and
Yeah. If we hear the news that there are some rockets, or like our air defense system is working, so it might somebody might get hurt. That's when we start to go to some corridors or maybe the halls or basements. But usually we just stay at our places, except for night. So when something happens in the night, I just don't want to risk, and I just go to the corridor and sleep on the floor, and follow this rule of 2 walls just for the sake of to be safe.
yeah, and everyone's getting the messages through apps and stuff through the.
Yeah, we have air raid sirens that are sounding all over the street. Also, some apps on the phone, on Telegram. We got some notifications. So yeah, we follow this.
Yeah. So just to kind of introduce yourself to the people watching, could you just tell us a bit more about yourself and your family and where you grew up?
Well, I don't know what to start with. So I'm, as I wrote to you, like I'm from a small town in the east of Ukraine. So I was born and raised in a small town, Pervomaisk, mining town in Lugansk region, or we call Lugansk Oblast. So I'm basically the person, these people of Donbass, that they're trying to defend nowadays. And yeah, I experienced this invasion twice in my life, in 2014, and now I'm experiencing it again.
And so the area that you grew up in is now part of the occupied territories?
Yes, it is occupied since 2014, unfortunately. And since that day, I haven't been there, and I haven't seen my hometown, my house where I was born, unfortunately, no.
And did you grow up in a Russian-speaking family or a Ukrainian?
Yes, funny enough, yes, I'm a Russian-speaking Ukrainian, although I don't regard myself as a Russian, and I didn't, by no means, I wanted to be liberated by Russia.
I mean, this has been one of the really strange things, I think, for me is this kind of hangover from Russian imperialism idea, where there are people who regard any Russian speakers as somehow Russian. Mm-hmm. And being an English person, it's like the world is full of countries that were colonized by England that speak English, but I would never, ever, ever regard as English.
Yeah.
3 weeks in Ireland, and I know the awful history of what the English did to the. While we were there, we saw sort of cottages during the famine, which was basically creating English. Mm-hmm. The idea that you'd go there and try to tell people that they need liberating because actually they're English and that they don't realize it is it's so,
yeah.
It's kind of what the propaganda has been, yeah. That
yeah, I totally agree with you.
You're somehow supposed to be Russian.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about this. It's just like some kind of I don't know, bad excuse, lame excuse to start this war. And
we have a question here saying in 2015, Lugansk was occupied by the Ukrainians themselves, wasn't it? So maybe this is a place to start. I mean, Lugansk is part of Ukraine, so I'm not sure how it can have been occupied by Ukrainians.
I don't know how it could be occupied. During the whole history of Lugansk region, yeah, it was under Russian Empire before the Soviet Union, but it was never occupied. There were some Ukrainian speakers, and it wasn't occupied actually. By the way, it was occupied even in the Soviet Union era by Russian speakers, because it was, like a mining city, and a lot of people went there to find some new job, and a lot of people from the other parts of the Russia came there. That's how it became Russian-speaking region, actually. So I don't know how it could be occupied if it's just historically.
And what history? Where are your family, like your parents from? Are your parents also from Lugansk, or do they have different roots? Or
Yeah, my father has roots from Russia, so I guess from Rostov or something like that. My mom, we don't know much because my grandma was an orphan, but I know that she was also from the east of Ukraine, so something like this.
Yeah, yeah. And so, just before we get on to kind of 2014 and
Sure.
what happened, forced you to leave, how did you then get into English and into later becoming an English teacher? How did it happen?
It's a funny story, actually. So when I was at school, English was taught like from from the fifth grade, as far as I remember. So before that, I didn't learn English at all. And when we started our English classes, there was a teacher, and she had a reputation of the best teacher in our small town. And she somehow noticed me, and she said, she came to my mom and said, I think that your daughter, she has some aptitude to languages, and I think I can give her some extra lessons. And my mom was like, okay, why not? And that's how it went. She became my tutor from the fifth grade till the 11th grade.
Oh.
And I had some extra lessons all this time with her. And it was the first time, at that time, it was in late 90s. We didn't have internet. We didn't have a lot of resources. Almost all of our English books were written by some former Soviet authors and based on this grammar translation method. But she introduced me to this book, Headway, Oxford University Press.
Was the I ever taught from?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and I like this book very much. And it was the first time when I heard this British accent, and I fell in love with it. And so, yeah, all these years we used this book, and it was completely different comparing to what we used in our classes at our state school. So, yeah, it helped me a lot, of course.
So when did you wanted to become a teacher?
Actually, at that time, I didn't want to become a teacher because my mother, she works as a teacher in the kindergarten.
Okay.
My aunt is a teacher at a state school. My grandma, she also used to work in a kindergarten, but now she's a pensioner. And they were like so fed up with teaching. So I was raised with this thought, like, never ever go into this profession, please don't. So I couldn't even think that I would one day become a teacher. It's just, I don't know. And that's why, like, when I finished school, as all 16-year-olds, I was totally lost, completely lost, unaware of what to do in my life. I didn't know what to do. I knew also, I felt like I was a little bit fed up with my English lessons at all. I wanted some break.
Yeah.
So I don't know, don't search for any logic in my decision, but I took a degree. I entered university and I got a degree in business management. Not related to teaching at all. I don't know, it's just like, yeah. But after some time, it was actually like, so I had decent English, but I didn't use it much. So I started to, loosen my skills a little bit. And then when I came to Kyiv, just a stroke of luck helped me. When I was strolling around the city, when I was just walking along this main street that we have in Kyiv, Khreshchatyk,
yeah.
One guy came to me and said, do you know English? And I said, yeah. He said, can you speak English? I said, yeah, I can. And he said, I'm a tourist. I'm new here. Can you please show me around? So I said, okay, why not? I felt like I have...
Line.
What?
It sounds like a pickup line.
No, it wasn't. So I showed him around and we started communicating. And I realized that I could still understand English. And I felt so good, I love this language. Actually, I remembered it, how much I love it. But I realized that my speaking skills were not the best. I couldn't say a line, it was just I forgot all the words. And at that moment, I realized that I just needed to refresh my knowledge. And anyway, in the end, we became close friends with this guy. But after this, I decided and I started to look for some nice, good schools of English in Kyiv, and I found one. And now I'm working at this school now.
You're working at the school you were studying at?
Yeah, exactly.
So you must have been a good student if they gave you a job at the...
So.
And what happened with the business management degree? Did that just go out of the window?
No, actually, when I finished university, I started my own business and it was going well. But at some point of time, we experienced radar seizure. And and I lost everything just in one day.
I missed it.
radar seizure, you know, like when some people, armed people, come to your office and say, okay, you need to sign up some documents, and now we are the owners of your company.
It's a massive takeover thing, yeah?
Yeah, this happens. And that's how I lost everything. And I was depressed, like, I don't know, for 6 months or something. And after that, I decided I don't want to have anything to do with business or something like this. So that's how, like, when this whole thing started in 2014 and I came to Kyiv, I had some kind of, you know, early middle-age crisis. Like, I didn't know what to do. I felt like I didn't want to do anything with business. I didn't know what I wanted. And then just this situation with this guy that I showed the city around, I realized that I wanted to learn English again. And that's how it ended.
So what are your memories of 2014? And to the people, you know, maybe the person who asked earlier who don't understand what happened, what happened in Lugansk and what forced you to leave?
The first thing that comes to my mind, you know, there was a lot of mess. A lot of mess, and I thought at first, you know, my psyche, it used this defense mechanism. I tried to just forget everything, you know, like when you experience some big stress in your life, you just start to try to forget everything. But then with this full-scale invasion, I started to reconsider again and again and think about what happened at that time. After we have this Maidan, you know, like they started using propaganda in our region. We have different media, you know, and there was some media more common in our region, and it was like pro-Russian media, and they used some propaganda to show that, oh, this Maidan thing, it was just so horrible, and there were some rumors spreading like now these people, these Nazi people, why, I don't know, some these Ukrainian Nazis, they will come to your region and they will just, I don't know what to do with you. And we believed, I myself, you know, all of us, we believed in this crap, sorry, pardon my French.
Feel free to say whatever you need to.
Yeah, so there was a lot of propaganda on this media level, and a lot of people, you know, like by word of mouth, people started talking about, yeah, like some Ukrainian Nazis are coming to our region. They want our minds. They want something from our region. They want us to become part of, I don't know, we already were Ukraine. We didn't consider ourselves as Russians. And then there were some like people with guns. And I was so, once I saw a man, a very strange one. He had this mask on his face. It was in the evening, and he had some like, I don't know, military equipment with him. I was so brainwashed, you know, with propaganda that the first thing that came to my mind, I thought like, oh, that's these people from Kyiv. Now I realized, and later I realized actually, that they were just these Russians. They came to our region and with the armed and try to, you know, seizure our region. And there was a lot of mess, mostly because, you know, like the Ukrainian authority, they also didn't help because there was no official evacuation of the region at that time. It wasn't even called a war. It was called like this anti-terroristic operation, you know. And also our mayor, the mayor of our town, he was collaborating with these so-called separatists, no, not so-called separatists, with these people. And there were a lot of strange people who I didn't know, Russian-speaking people. Apparently, they were not from our region. They didn't know anything around the city. And they just, yeah, they became like, they started acting as if it was their region and they were like liberating us. So there was a lot of mess. And I heard like, because of this Russian-speaking, you know, region, a lot of propaganda from Russian media. I even believe that before the whole thing escalated, you know, like in July or June of 2014, the media, so they stopped broadcasting Ukrainian media, and they stopped and started broadcasting Russian media, Russian news, Russian channels like Star or something like this. Oh, they were telling some horrible stories about this and about like, again, talking about like Second World War, and yeah, relating to some, you know, like history that we had in the past, you know, and they were telling just horrific stories about these Maidan people and these neo-Nazis. And I guess now I understand that it was just part of this hybrid war, you know, that they started. And
Yeah.
people started to believe at my work, where I was working, some people came to me, they say, even at that time, how I understood that that was a lie, because in 2022, they used the same. Some people came to me and you say, I heard that there are some biolaboratories in 2014.
Even in 2014.
2014, yeah, created by Ukrainians. Yeah. And or, there are some prohibited missiles that they're using, Ukrainians, and then in 2022 everything repeated, and then I was like, okay, again, come on, so this is totally propaganda.
2022 you had the killer mosquitoes.
Yeah. This is just
the battalions of satanic American Nazi gays or something.
Yeah, but how are we supposed to believe this? Come on, they say that we're the same nation. So if Ukrainians created these mosquitoes to kill Russians, apparently they should kill Ukrainians as well, right? Because we're the same nation. Like, how?
It's a very clever hybrid operation. And I mean, so what interests me is, why did you or your family then decide to go into kind of non-combat parts of Ukraine? Because I know some people at that point left and went over the border to Russia. Yeah,
it was natural for people, because we had a lot of relatives in Russia. We still have a lot of people had some connections, acquaintances, so because it was closer to that board, so it was a natural process that some people came to Russia to escape the war. And at that time I remember this not rumors, but people were so sure that this would last only for a couple of weeks. Everyone was so sure, oh, it won't last for long. No, this is just some kind of strange situation. It will. And I didn't have a lot of choice, actually. Just my friends were living in Kyiv at that time, and they offered some help, and they helped me to buy the tickets for train to Kyiv. And actually, it was the last train, so I was lucky enough to go to the last train to Kyiv, because after this, they bombed the railways. So it was my last chance, actually. And that's how.
You said you haven't been back to your hometown at all, or the occupied.
Yeah.
You still have family or friends there or anything, or?
Yeah, I have some acquaintances there. I have some relatives there. As far as I know, they still live there, but we don't communicate much. At first, we tried to keep in touch. Nowadays, I don't know, and I don't know how I can. It was very difficult to get there even before the full-scale invasion, because of this, to go to around the border or to the border, and the road was so expensive and difficult. And I just felt that I couldn't just, emotionally go through this experience and see my town in ruins. And although still for now it's more or less okay, but the nearest town, which is near my hometown, Popasnaya, maybe you heard about this.
Yeah.
It was just razed to ground.
Basically completely flattened.
Yeah.
And so you left Lugansk and you went to Kyiv, where all the rumors had been telling you it's full of Ukrainian Nazis who are going to kill Russia.
Yeah, I didn't see anyone, even my friends who were still living in Lugansk at that time. They would call me and say, we heard that if you speak Russian in the streets of Kyiv, they will arrest you and they will take you to the basement of this safe SBU, this institution of Ukraine. And I was like, what? So yeah, it wasn't true.
I've had Russians tell me these stories, and it's like having been in Kyiv and Odessa and places. I mean, I heard Russian spoken all the time, obviously. And a lot of my friends from Kyiv come from Russian-speaking backgrounds and Russian-speaking families, and people just seem to switch between the two languages fairly effortlessly.
Yeah, exactly. All my life, I've been living here all my life, and I've traveled to Kyiv, to Lviv before the war, before 2014. The only thing that I heard, only rumors from other people, like you shouldn't talk, for example, Russian in Lviv or something, like in the west of Ukraine. Or I've never experienced any hatred from regarding my language, never ever. Only from this propaganda.
Mm.
Of course, nowadays, people in Kyiv, in Ukraine, I have a lot of friends that started to switch to Ukrainian just to show their resistance and show that we're not part of Russia, by no means. But no one will kick you, no one will hate you if you start talking in Russian, especially with your friend, for example.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so once you move to Kyiv and you're then in, outside of the occupied territories, what were was there a point at which people in Kyiv didn't fully understand what was happening in the Donbass region?
Unfortunately, yes. Like I remember myself, I spent like a whole night, like I came to Kyiv and I sent my parents because I could get only one ticket to Kyiv. So I sent my parents by bus to the sea, which was not Didnt, something like in Donetsk region. It wasn't occupied. It was safe at that time. So I just sent them to some safe place at that time. And I remember while I was in the train, they were stuck somewhere in the field because there was some battle with missiles, and they were just stuck there and waiting until the battle would stop. And I remember I couldn't sleep the whole night because I was like constantly calling my mom and checking if they were safe. So yeah, I remember I just came to Kyiv. I burst into tears. My boyfriend met me here, and we were sitting and eating something like in McDonald's at the railway station. And I remember I was just like not eating, I was just only crying, and people around, they were just living their own lives because they were not actually realizing fully what was happening there in the East. So it was like the most disheartening thing for me at that time, of course.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot from people who left the East and came to Kyiv or to other parts of Ukraine, that there was a sort of a weird unreality where people in the other areas weren't really fully understanding what was happening, or were blaming the people from those areas for having brought it on themselves or for being collaborators or whatever. And
yeah, but I can't blame people for this because, like it's just the nature of person. Yeah, until it started somehow affecting you, you just don't realize it fully. So
yeah,
it's just, I guess, a normal thing.
Yeah. And so where were you when the full-scale, were you in Kyiv?
Full-scale invasion, yes, I was in Kyiv. I was working, I was trying to get my CELT S certification.
Good timing.
Good timing, yes. And I remember that that week that the full-scale invasion started, on Saturday, I was supposed to take my TKT test. And I was so tired. I was teaching offline. I was trying to get my certificate. I was learning. And I was thinking, okay, I need something. I just need some break. And then the war started. And my first thought was like, okay, maybe I should like reconsider my thoughts to think more positively. I wanted to stop, but not in that way,
Yeah.
Of course, I was shocked. It was 5 a.m. My mom called me and my mom just shouted at me like, the war started. And I was completely numb. I was speechless, and it was a nightmare. And I don't remember the first 2 or 3 days. It was just like, I don't know, some vicious circle. Like when you dash in from your flat to the basement, we didn't have some decent shelter there. And then again, and no one understands what's happening. You are searching, constantly checking the Telegram feed. It was just a nightmare.
I forgot to actually ask. So, did you leave Lugansk, or were you in Lugansk when the Malaysian airliner was shot down?
I was living in my hometown. I had to get back to my hometown in Peromaisk in Lugansk region. Yeah, I heard about this. But
yeah, okay. And so,
but
have you stayed the whole time, or did you leave Kyiv at any point?
Can you
Yes.
sorry?
So after the full-scale invasion started, did you stay in Kyiv the whole time? Did you leave?
No, I left Kyiv for some time because I started feeling that I was losing my mind because because of this, the logistics experienced some problems, and the supermarkets stopped working, pharmacies stopped working, and we just became like zombie, always like sitting in the shelter and very frightened of these noises of rockets and so on. And then we heard that the Russians are already somewhere in the north of Kyiv. They already went to Bucha, Irpin, and we thought like, okay, we need to go somewhere because it feels like it won't finish in a week or so. And we just went to my relative who was living in the Cherkasy region. It's somewhere to the south, to the eastern south of Kyiv. It was just a super tiny, small village, like 1,000 dwellers or so. Like there aren't even ATMs, you know, like it's just so small. And my relatives were just like calming me down, like, you know, don't worry, nobody will come here because we have nothing here to invade or something. And I spent like almost a month there, but I don't know how I survived. I was just like a zombie, you know, like always searching through this Telegram use, and constantly like on the phone with my relatives. Yeah. But then in April we returned to Kyiv because I thought we saw these huge lines and people going back to Kyiv, and we decided to get back to.
So we have a question there. Do you think it's fair to block teaching sites for Russian teachers?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
So the question was, do you think it's fair to block teaching sites for Russian teachers?
To be honest, maybe it's not fair, but this is maybe an effective and natural tool to somehow affect the situation, because otherwise, like, it feels like Russians don't realize what is happening there, you know? I had this situation, like, when the full-scale invasion started, some of my friends, we started, you know, like, we started addressing the Russians, our Russian friends and acquaintances in the media, in social media, like, can you do something? Can't you see what is happening? And they were like so oblivious. Like one friend texted me like, how are you? I was like, not very good, you know, because I'm in the basement. You know, like, and you know that your country actually started invading our country. And he said like, oh, you know, it's so complicated and it's so unclear what is happening there. So maybe you shouldn't jump to conclusions. It's all like, you know, authorities, they're just fighting with each other. Like, it's like NATO, it's America. I don't know very much about this. And I was like, okay, you don't know, but I know.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah. As always, yeah. But I can see what is happening from my window. Come on. I can see the rockets and people and...
Yeah, I mean, Olga's just put a message there saying, yes, maybe people will start realizing what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, my own feeling about it is that if the biggest thing you're worrying about is the fact that you've been blocked access to teaching sites, then be happy, because what Ukrainians are experiencing at the hands of Russia is a million times worse than this. And, you know, millions of Ukrainians have lost their homes, had to leave their homes.
Millions of Ukrainians, not millions, okay, thousands of Ukrainians lost their lives. So maybe, yeah.
And if your biggest problem is you can't access a teaching center at the end of the world.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry.
Go on.
I remember a situation like before this full-scale invasion. I was subscribed to a lot of teachers, English teachers from Russia, like to my experienced colleagues, and I expected some reaction from them. Nothing. And I remember that there was one, and she was asked by her followers, "Why don't you say anything about the war in Ukraine?" And she says, "You know, my blog is a professional blog,
non-political."
Non-political, yeah. So I try not to go into politics." And I was like, come on, you have, as far as I remember, she had her own language school, English school. She prepared for IELTS. She prepared for Cambridge exams. And nowadays, as far as I know, they're prohibited. They cannot take these exams in Russia. It is actually directly affecting your blog, your profession, and you still say nothing. How?
Yeah, someone else has said, agree that individuals should be paying for politics. I'm just picturing being in Russia and not being able to make a living because of this. Well, try picture being in Ukraine and not being able to make a living because of this. I think the problem is that there's an idea that somehow individual politics are different. One of the problems I've found talking to Russians I'm still in touch with, and I still have a VK profile, I still talk to, I mean, I've been to Russia 30, 40, 50 times, so I know a lot of Russians, and I hear you completely on that, not wanting to think about what's going on, not facing the reality of it. Who can know what's really happening, lots of
It's
this.
just some sort of escapism, that's all.
And I think there's also a really big thing of not feeling like a citizen of the country and kind of feeling sorry for yourself because of where you were born, and this feeling that there's nothing we can do, we're just little people, politics
Yeah,
is...
yeah, yeah. Just
And
little
I
people.
think the thing is, I mean, as a citizen, we're all responsible for what happens in our countries.
Yeah.
And sometimes terrible things happen in our country. I mean, when the Iraq war happened, I was completely 100% opposed to the Iraq war, you know, and you go on the demos against it, you write letters against it. I was teaching Iraqis who were being bombed by my country while the Iraq war was going on. And I understand why the terror attacks happened in England because of the Iraq war. And part of, you know, when Brexit happened, I didn't vote, didn't support Brexit. I'm now having to face consequences because of the Brexit vote. Like, I can't go and live and work in the European Union in the way I used to be able to. My children can't go and live and work in the European Union. Our cost of living's gone up. You know, there's all these consequences that I have to deal with for something that I didn't vote for and that I didn't support. But the way I look at this is, well, I could have done more. But there's a lovely Voltaire quote which says, every person is guilty of the good they didn't do. And I think I now look back and think, well, I could have done more against the Iraq war. I could have done more to persuade more people not to vote for Brexit. I could have played a more active role in trying to influence the politics of my country. And I didn't, but as a citizen of that country, I now have to live with the consequences. And I think part of the problem in Russia is, I think the actual real support for the war is fairly small. I suspect you're looking at 20-25% of the population who are like the kind of crazy Z patriots, you know?
Yeah.
But 50% of the population who are just trying to bury their heads in the sand and pretend.
Exactly.
And in a way, this is a kind of passive support for what's happening, because you're not, by choosing to not do politics, that's a political choice. And so the idea that companies would carry on doing business with Russia while Russia's trying to commit genocide in Ukraine is just crazy. Russia is destabilizing the whole of Europe. It's using the food crisis to kind of threaten global famine. And the idea that companies would still say, but anyway, here's some free website stuff that you can carry on using. And I don't think, actually, whatever the non-native speakers said, Russians aren't, they can still earn livings. There are still people teaching English in Russia. They still run webinars. They still do teacher training sessions. They, you know, there are still people earning a living. I don't think it's, I mean, personally, I think the sanctions are a tool that has to be used to put leverage on the people living in the country. And at some point, Russians, you know, in the end, for a lot of people, the choice is going to be you fight for Putin or you fight against Putin. And I think people, like you said, I mean, with Ukraine as well, people tend to stay away from things until it affects them. I think once the drone attacks start increasing and once the ruble collapses more thoroughly, people realize that politics is actually affecting them as well. And,
yeah, maybe there will be some sort of awakening for them.
And, you know, at the moment, the result of Russians fighting against the Putin regime is that Ukrainians are dying fighting the Putin regime and fighting the Russians who come to Ukraine as part of that. So I don't know. For me, I think your biggest problem is you can't access a teacher site. You know, go and have a look at what happened in Mariupol and tell me you've got problems. You know,
I couldn't agree more.
We've got more comments here. It's far. It is fair that teaching websites are blocked. They should be restricted anyway, so that even little Russians will feel some sanctions and start doing something to stop the war. For those of you that don't know the reference, the little Russians, I'm guessing, is Belarusians, or I don't know, or just little people in Russia. Then how come Ukrainian teachers should be paying for politics? Why don't you picture being in Ukraine and not being able to work? Exactly. Just embrace shared responsibility. That's your reality now, just as we were rushing to the shelter every other night. Well, it's a lot of comments today. Don't usually get this many comments. I agree, which the world is, so they become aware of what's going on as we be resistant. Yeah, that wasn't fair to you, was it? I'm not sure what that refers to, non-native speaker. It's not my biggest problem. It is a kind of discrimination of Russians all over the world. Poor Russians. The people of Russia are against the war. Well, if Russians are against the war, do more to stop the war. Because at the moment, saying you're against the war isn't, it's easy to say you're against the war. In the end, unless you're taking direct action to stop the war, it's a meaningless statement for people inside Ukraine, I think. And yeah, I don't know. The idea that Russians are being discriminated against, I think, is nonsensical at the moment.
Well, I'm sorry for Russians who are living in other countries and they're discriminated, but it's a natural process. They need to face it, because imagine like the Second World War when it finished. I don't think that a lot of people outside were very happy to see German people, yeah, because no, come on, it's just a natural process, so they have to face it.
My granddad's generation, the people who the war, would never speak to a German again. I mean, for years, across the road if they heard German in England. And you know, it's not fair or logical or anything, but I think it's a very human reaction.
Yeah.
There's a story last time I did one of these videos. I have a Russian friend who was in Germany in the 90s, and a young German guy got talking to him and asked, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Russia." And the German guy said, "I just want you to know how sorry I am for what happened." And
yeah,
my
so many years.
About what? He's going, "The war." He's like, "It was, oh, I wasn't even born. You weren't born. Why?" And the German guy was saying, "Well, you know, I still want you to know I'm sorry." And at the time, now we were talking recently, he was saying, now I comes from, and I understand that there's a kind of collective guilt that you carry with you through generations.
Yeah.
What can I, a 30-year-old teacher, do with this? Well, that's up to you to decide, Maria. Okay. There are always things you can do. What you can do is talk more about it. What you can do is work out ways of sending money to the Ukrainian armed forces. What you can do is, you know, find out what's going on in your area.
Yeah. Maybe the first thing I would recommend, just switch off your TV.
Yeah.
And start listening to Russian propaganda, and maybe search the information by yourself to find the truth, and maybe to spread the truth among your friends and relatives. And maybe after some time it will help.
Guys from Russia. Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of other people are writing comments about collective, which is kind of what we talked about. So can I go back to teaching, Natalie? Yeah.
Sure.
How has the last 18 months affected your teaching? I mean, I'm guessing while you were staying in Turkey, you weren't able to do any teaching at all, and you had to take a break from teaching, or what?
Yeah, I had to take a break, first of all. Well, first of all, our school needed to take a break because, you know, like we had to stop teaching because of this full-scale invasion, because we were teaching mostly offline, and a lot of teachers, I had some colleague who is from Bucha, she had to flee the country. So we were all like in danger. It was dangerous in Kyiv at that time. So we stopped for 2 or 3 weeks, as far as I remember. And then we continued teaching, the teaching process. And at that point, actually, I realized I didn't want to, because I still felt like, you know, depressed. And I thought like, how can I do something except just following the situation outside? And there were so numerous videos, you know. The problem that nowadays there is not a family that wasn't affected by the war. In every family there was a friend of mine, like a friend of a friend, or a relative who was killed or injured because of this war. And I felt like I'm a very empathetic person, you know, and it was really difficult for me. But then like my academic directors, they called me and say like, you know, we continue the learning process. Can you please join us? And I didn't want to at first, but I did. And I realized that it was helping me a lot when I saw my students who were still in Kyiv, and they were learning during the air raid alarms working. I felt like, how can I give up if they don't give up? and it gave me some strength, and it united us at all a lot actually. So
And were you
it helped me.
face?
What?
Were you working face to face, like directly?
No. We continued working online. Yeah.
Yeah. It must have been really difficult in Kyiv through last winter, and I know there was a lot of disruption to the electricity and heating and water, and
it was really difficult with no light, electricity. And I remember when there were the first strikes on our electricity stations, electricity plants, like we didn't have electricity for 2 or 3 days in a row at first, and there was no heating, and at first there wasn't even water. It was difficult. It was, emotionally very difficult. But again, when you see, like, I had a wonderful group of preparing for FC exam, and like even people when we were experiencing blackouts and people are still using their mobile phones and mobile connection to join your class, and they're still striving to learn, it gives you a lot of strength, and it gives you this moral duty not to give up and to work together.
yeah, no, I find that really, really inspirational, watching how teachers have managed to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Help me
But it wasn't the best experience in my life.
I mean, yeah, I can imagine. But I guess as a teacher, you get good at kind of leaving whatever problems you've got at the door of the classroom anyway. Do you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes, like, you have a terrible argument at home, or you have problems with your family or something, or you have a bad journey to work, and you get to the classroom and you have to kind of go, right, so good morning, how is everybody? And you kind of switch immediately. So I guess as a teacher, you have that kind of, I don't know, that ability to kind of turn off what's happening outside and be in the room and in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And like the reaction, I try to joke during my lessons. I know, like, I'm trying to talk to my students too. I try to listen to them actually, and to hear what they're saying. And after the lesson, I'm very in my high spirits, because I got that reaction from them, and this energy, recharging my batteries actually from them. And it helps a lot to overcome these difficult days actually. Yeah.
I'm just going to come back to one comment I've just seen there.
Sure.
So, the non-native speaker, as an Armenian, should I want all Turkish people to be without jobs and spread hate towards their activities and lives? Of course not. Well, it's a kind of false parallel, because the Turkish massacre of Armenians was over 100 years ago. I mean, if Turkey was at the moment committing genocide in Armenia, I suspect you might feel differently. It's easy to say that now with historical hindsight. Mm-hmm. I still think probably Turkey could do a bit more to recognise its role in the Armenian genocide. Yeah. And maybe to make reparations for that. But when a country is in the middle of trying to destroy your country and kill your people, it's not unreasonable to expect there to be some consequences for people in that country. I don't know, maybe you disagree, non-native speaker, but you're from a luxurious position of not being in a country that people are trying to destroy at the moment. What's happened? I prefer hating the nation's representatives, which have come to kill my countrymen. Yeah, I think that's fine as well. We just war memes as a warm-up. Yeah, I've been a lot of war memes, I've got to say. I think what one thing I'm impressed by with Ukraine is Ukraine's definitely winning the meme war.
Exactly. Yeah, whatever happens, like during the first second, there are thousands of memes on the internet about this situation. Yeah, and that's true.
Have you been involved in anything else outside of teaching at all, Natalie?
Well, actually, I plunged into teaching, and I'm snowed under with teaching nowadays and with my work, and I got a promotion recently. So thank you. It takes a lot of time, so I don't have much time, outside the class, but whenever I feel the need to recharge my batteries, because you understand, the teaching is emotionally actually demanding, and also I'm an introverted person. Maybe you can't say this now, but I am.
You're in the wrong profession.
Yeah. So, well, typically when I'm not teaching, I just try to somehow, like recharge my batteries. I go to the swimming pool or do yoga or just some horse riding, nothing special, just take some time to, yeah, to recharge this.
Yeah, I think for a lot of Ukrainians at the moment, just the whole issue of maintaining mental health be
Yes, yes,
very, very difficult, I think,
that's the
because
hardest one.
like you're going into a second winter, like, oh, more of this shit, seriously.
That's why our sense of humor helps us, because if you're laughing, you're not crying. So
Yeah, I can imagine. And do you still have any family or any friends that are in Russia at the moment?
yeah, I have actually. My father lives in Russia, and he doesn't live with us. He haven't lived for a long time. Like he has been there for more than 20 something years. Yeah, I don't know. I don't communicate. Actually, I banned him in March 2022 because when I was showing him some videos, footage of Kharkiv, when it was shelled and destroyed the city center, and he said like, no, it's so unclear, everything is so unclear. We don't know everything. No, like all these Russian.
Usual,
So he's yeah, don't believe everything you see, like, and I'm like, come on, I can see some of the things with my own eyes. How can I not believe my eyes, And he was like, everything is so like not clear. Again, it's just NATO and America and something like this. So I just couldn't deal with this anymore and just banned him. And I stopped communicating him from that time.
He hasn't tried to get back in touch with you?
No, but he keeps in touch with my mom, just like checking on her, but not with me. And even I remember clearly on the first day of the invasion, when we were sitting in the shelter in the basement and checking the news, and he called me using internet and asked like how I was going. And I thought that no, of course he can't. And I was trying to calm him down, and I was said like, don't worry. We heard that there was some rocket missile just fell down in the street. But don't worry, I was trying to calm him down. It just hit some kind of billboard, and it was true, like somewhere in the street. And I was amazed when he said, maybe it should have hit the building. And in this case, your authorities would do something to stop it. And I was like, okay, maybe it's your authorities should stop it, not ours, because it's you who started this, At that time, I understood that he was brainwashed completely. So I don't know what to talk about with him.
Yeah, I find this the most remarkable aspect of what's with the war, really. That
it's such a victim blaming. Like if some perpetrator comes to your house and starts killing your relatives, takes part of your house, and they say, you should negotiate with him, and it was your fault. Come on, it's just a victim blaming.
Yeah. No, I just find it incredible that people can kind of abandon their own flesh and blood like this and not believe the experience of their own children. And
my story is not unique. We have so many stories like this in Ukraine.
People, one of my friends, her mum married a Russian guy and has been living there about 15 years. Very similar story to yours. And she called her mum last New Year's Eve after a couple of drinks in a moment of optimism. And her mum basically ended up shouting, you deserve to die, you're a Nazi. I'm your daughter. Just
what
incredible.
A BS.
And people get on holiday every year to Odessa for all of their lives, and then suddenly basically saying, you're all Nazis and you all deserve to die, and it just kind of clicks overnight. Something changes. I find that terrifying.
It's just sad.
And like you said, you can try and have rational conversations about it, but you realize how deep the propaganda is. And in the end, going back to Maria's question earlier, Maria, one thing you can do is talk more to anybody who tells you that this isn't happening, or that it's America doing this, or that Ukraine's bombing itself, or it's gay Nazis, or whatever people tell you. You have to have those conversations yourself, and you have to be part of the process of spreading the truth inside Russia. And maybe you're doing that already. And if you are, congratulations and thank you. If you're not, do more of it. And you know, they want you to be scared of telling those truths, obviously, but it needs to happen.
You know, I think the biggest problem of Russians is that just it lies beneath this situation. The bottom line is they think that they're little people and they can't do anything. And like, you know, they are related to this, inclined to think that there's always somebody somewhere, like authority, some tsar, like in the latest, like in Russian, like in the past, or like Putin or whoever, and they can't do anything with it. Like there's always some steady hand who would do everything for them. But come on, this is not how actually power works. You're little people, but this guy sitting, he is representing you. And if he does something that you don't want to do him, so maybe you should do something with this.
I mean, I thought that was the most interesting thing about the Wagner failed rebellion is you suddenly realize actually how fragile Putin's power really is. And, you know, you realize that if 10,000 people decided to march on Moscow with some guns, it's over. And, you know, in the end, things can only happen because of the complicity of people within the country, enough people within the country, not everybody. And, you know, I have Russian friends I know who are involved in very illegal ways to what's going on at the moment, and they're risking their lives to do that. But you need the complicity of enough people to just not look at what's happening.
Exactly.
And, you know, I guess in return to people, I would also say, how do you think Russians felt about Germans at the end of the Second World War? You know, did you feel, oh, it was only the authorities that were doing it? I suspect not, because, you know, most Russians have family history of people dying during the Nazi period. Yeah. So how do you feel yourself when you hear people? I can imagine what your answer is going to be to this, but I think what we're going to see in the next sort of weeks and months as the counteroffensive kind of slowly grinds on, there's going to be people in the West who start kind of saying, oh, there should just be a compromise. There needs to be a peace deal. We need peace now. Why can't you have a negotiated settlement? What's wrong with you? Why do you want to continue this war?
It's a very...
Ask the question, but...
I think they should ask this question to this lady who lost her child last Saturday in Chernihiv because of this Russian shelling. I guess they should ask this question to the guy, like a friend of a very distant acquaintance of mine who fled Donetsk, and he lost all his family when they were trying to flee Bucha last year. Would they like to negotiate? Would they like to compromise? And maybe they should ask, like I had some also friend, we didn't know each other in person, but we were friends on Facebook. Some American teacher who was living in Kyiv in Ukraine, and he died last year in Chernihiv also because of this Russian shelling. Maybe they should ask their relatives, would they like to negotiate? Would they like to compromise? And how would they feel, these Western people, in this situation?
Yeah, I hear,
hear
you. And I know this may sound like another stupid question, but how are you feeling about the coming months and year?
Unfortunately, I'm not that optimistic about the upcoming winter, because I realize that the Russians will continue bombing our electricity plants, electricity stations. I don't know. I just want to survive this winter.
Yeah.
And then we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And unless anyone else has any questions, if you do have any other questions or comments, please feel free just to stick them in the chat there. Is there anything else you'd like to share, or anything else you'd like to say to anyone?
Oh.
I'm guessing from looking at it, we've got quite a wide range of people. We've got people inside Ukraine. I saw earlier there was someone from Donetsk saying what you were saying really resonated with them. We've got people obviously watching inside Russia. We've got an Armenian. I'm hoping there's people from Western Europe also watching. So just wondered if there's anything else you wanted to say or share. It's fine if not, no pressure.
That's no pressure, yeah, thank you. That's a very tricky question. I don't know even what to think about. You know, when I was thinking through your questions that you sent me, they were so profound that they made me reconsider my whole life, my whole experience during these last 10 years. It was already like therapy with a psychological therapy. I don't know what to say, actually. I just to Russians, I don't have anything to say, and I think that I can speak on behalf of all Ukrainians. We don't want to speak with Russians anymore. We tried to last year, but we don't want to anymore, and we want to do nothing with them. So sorry, and I don't know how much time will pass after we will be able to do this. Yeah.
No, I understand. I think it's going to take a long time for a lot of people to want to be able to talk with people in that way. I mean, I know myself, I've lost a lot of Russian followers, friends, people I thought were friends that we can't talk anymore in any kind of meaningful capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in touch with some people. A lot of people took their heads down and we're not communicating. They don't contact me, I don't contact them. You know, the channels of communication are there if they want to use them. I don't know. And it's very strange for me because I think, you know, as you know, I first went to Russia in 1999, and I was there in the November before the full-scale invasion, and I now look at it and think I'll almost certainly never go again. And I can't imagine circumstances at the moment in which it would be possible or desirable for that to happen. So it's strange for me, kind of feeling like I've lost that whole part of my life, and that I wasn't seeing things as clearly as I now see them. It's a bit like you were saying yourself, you know, it takes time for the scales to kind of fall from your eyes sometimes. And I think
that's true.
Once you do see things clearly, it's very hard to kind of unsee them and to go back to where you were before.
Yeah, you know, like what I can add, like before this all thing, before 2014, you know, a lot of Ukrainians, they were offended by Westerns when they were like, where are you from? Ukraine? It's somewhere in Russia. So we were, you know, like we were very offended, and we thought like, okay, the world should know who we are. Now the world knows, but we didn't want the world to know in that way, you know. But I believe that after the war, and it should end at some point of time, after it ends and after Ukraine wins, I hope that the whole world will know who Ukrainians are and regard them as very brave people who are able to stand for their beliefs, stand for their countries. And I just want to wish luck to all my citizens, to other people of Ukraine, and wish them strength to overcome these hard times. Because, you know, like, after these dark times, there's always some dawn, and I hope we will see this.
You've actually reminded me of something that it goes to what you were saying about this belief that we're just little people and that we can't influence politics in any way. Something Timothy Snyder said in one of the lectures about Ukraine, stuck with one of the lessons of Ukraine's resistance to the Russian invasion is freedom is something we do together. Yeah. And that's such a powerful idea, this idea that part of what we all have to do as citizens of a country and as people is to work together to create freedom. And I think one of the things that I've learned from understanding what's happening with Ukraine and the resistance to the Russian invasion is very much that there's a sort of organic grassroots self-organizing element to the way Ukraine works. People don't wait for someone above them to tell them what needs doing or how to react or what to do. People are very able to join together,
organize
on
themselves,
very local kinds of levels and on larger kind of levels, organize themselves and see what needs doing. And I find that really, really inspirational. I mean, when I was a kid, I kind of grew up in the aftermath of punk and was always very interested in kind of ideas about anarchism and self-organizing societies. And I read a lot about the history of anarchism. And I look at a lot of what's happening with Ukraine, and it's kind of like a sort of self-organizing anarchism without the self-consciousness. You know, it's not like, oh, we're anarchists and we're just organizing without the state. It's like we see what needs doing and we're going to do it, and we're going to work together to bring about positive changes. And I think someone else has said it's not only independence but freedom. Yeah. And I think, I mean, one of the other things I find from talking to Ukrainians is this idea that Russian lives in Donbass matter. There's always one. There are no Russian lives in Donbass. There are lives of Russian-speaking Ukrainians.
Yeah.
The only Russian lives there are in Donbass at the moment are from people who've agreed to fight for the Russian army and have come to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians and told them to get better. You know, you're listening here to someone who is a Russian-speaking person from Donbass. I mean, if you believe the lives of Russian speakers from Donbass.
Look, like, I have something to say about this. Yes, Russian-speaking Ukrainian lives in Donbass matter. But you know who started this? I can speak for myself. When I was living in Peromaisk in 2014, there were these separatists, these guys from Russia who came to my house. They installed this weapon near my house, and they started shooting in the direction of this nearby city, which was under Ukraine, this Popasnaya, and they shoot it during the whole week. And we heard these explosions. At that time, we didn't know what these explosions were. After that, we realized, like, we were sitting in the basement, we were experiencing this nightmare. So who started this? They came. We didn't ask. We didn't invite them. They came to our house. They came with their weapons. They started shooting at Ukrainians. Of course, after the week, the Ukrainians started shooting back. And then there were some innocent people injured. My drawing teacher was killed in the yard of her house via these rocket missiles. But from what it started? From whom? It was them. And I saw this with my own eyes. And they were not Ukrainians. Come on, I talked to them. I could see that they didn't understand. They didn't know the area. They didn't know our, you know, this Donbass language, like this accent of this. So this is how it all started. And I don't know. And now they are using this propaganda like they were like defending us. It's such a BS. Sorry.
I think for people like Vera, if you believe that Russian lives, then you have a responsibility to act more against the Putin regime, because one thing Putin has made very, very clear is he doesn't give a shit about Russian lives. Putin is quite happy to send 500,000 Russians to die in Ukraine.
Yeah, and you know, like when they say like, oh, it's you, people in Donbass, you were waiting for Putin, you wanted him. Come on, I remember when these guys came to our town, it was like in the middle of the summer in 2014, some random guys from Russia, Russian speaking with arms, they came to one of the area of our small city, and I heard that some old guy, he came to them and said, guys, we don't want any problems. Could you just not go, and can you just go away? And there were like a bunch of people, armed people, and they say like, you know, old man, do you want to be killed? No? Then go away and don't teach us. And then they just started, you know, like allocating there. They were starting installing their weapons near housing estates, near buildings, near our houses, and that's how it started. So we were not waiting for anyone. Of course, there was some small percentage, like brainwashed people, but we were not waiting. We didn't want to be liberated. We don't want to be defended by Putin or Russians. And
I mean, someone else has just said this stupid war is one big tragedy for both sides. Yeah, but one side could stop it tomorrow.
Yeah,
you know, this is
exactly.
Yes, it is. Of course it is.
Exactly.
And it's for Russia as well.
To all these, you know, to all these lines when they say like, oh, where have you been for these 8 years when you were bombing Donbass, you know, this stupid line. And everyone like from Ukraine, they would say like, come on, but can you realize that before 2014, no one was bombing Donbass?
I mean,
maybe you should think about this more.
I was in Donetsk in 2013, and
beautiful city.
Beautiful city, and there were Ukrainian flags all over the walls, and you know, it was a really, really great place, and I really enjoyed it. And so, you know, there was certainly nothing that the propaganda would have people believe going on there. Vera's back. Crimean Russian lives matter. Yes, Vera, of course they do. Crimea is an occupied territory. and it will be deoccupied. And once it's deoccupied, people who want to live in Russia can go and live in Russia. And Russian speakers in Crimea who don't want to live in Russia, and I know there are plenty because I have Crimean friends who are now living in Kyiv, who are from Russian-speaking families who have no desire to be part of Russia. I mean, we'll stay as Russian-speaking Ukrainians. The referendum in Crimea was voluntary. Maybe I'd like to say something quickly about the referendums up in the Lugansk People's Republic, because Vera obviously doesn't understand this.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Maybe you'd like to say something about the referendums that were held.
Oh, I have something to say, by the way.
Vera is saying they were voluntary referendums.
About voluntary referendum, we had one in Peromaisk when I was living there in 2014, and I didn't go there because I realized that it was just a shit show. But anyways, one of my friends went there just to check what was going on. And when he came back, he said, they didn't even check my passport. Can you imagine how they counted the votes? How they counted the turnout at this election, so-called referendum, which was voluntary, if they didn't even ask your ID at that time? I believe the same was in Crimea. They just counted as they wanted, and that's all.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the same as they do in Russia for elections. I mean,
yeah.
Anyone in Russia seriously believes that there are free and fair elections inside Russia. And so the idea that there'd be free and fair elections in the occupied territories is grimly comic, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is just for people outside of Ukraine that maybe they don't understand is one of the things that happens once areas are occupied is a lot of people who don't want to be there manage to leave. And Russia then, like you were saying with Donbass originally, I mean, it's part of the kind of imperial project of Russia. I was reading a thing this weekend about Russian estate agents selling property in Mariupol.
Yeah.
I mean,
heard about this.
Mariupol was probably the worst tragedy in Europe since the Second World War. Tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands are dead. The whole city is kind of destroyed. They're rebuilding it, and they're trying to bring 300,000 Russians in to kind of populate it.
After 5 years, they will say, okay, look, it's a Russian-speaking region. There are a lot of Russians. Should we defend it?
So
that's what they're doing.
There's no medical insurance in Ukraine. Russia brought health insurance to the entire population. Vera. Have you been to rural Russia, Vera? Because I have. Go to rural Russia and have a look at the lives of most people. 40% of people in rural Russia don't have toilets. Yeah, this is why looting of toilets happened in Bucha and Irpin. So when Russia can take care of its own people and provide toilets and healthcare and electricity for people in the villages so that they don't have to go to Ukraine to steal other people's toilets and refrigerators.
Everything. I heard numerous stories of looting, of stealing everything they could see, starting from a cow in the village, ending with some whiskey or even lingerie. It's just humiliating.
I've seen all those things on VK of people posting about things they've stolen, things. Nobody forced us. Of course not, Vera. Thank you. Yeah, well, it's nice to know that we're being watched by Russian trolls. Russian propaganda is still doing its job. I guess I was going to ask you one final question, actually, Natalie.
Sure.
Your own kind of attitude to the language. Like, are you shifting yourself away from Russian, or are you still speaking Russian? Or what's your relationship with the language now?
When I'm talking to Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, I try to switch to Ukrainian to show my respect. Yeah, when I'm talking inside my family, with my mom, with my grandma, with my partner, of course, I use Russian because they are speaking Russian, and it's just the way of respect, to show respect, Sometimes when I just need to say something like on the go, still I think in Russian. Yeah, I can't change it. So I feel free when I speak in Russian. But when we work at school, when we talk to our students or to colleagues, we try to use we use Ukrainian, and I'm learning. I like Ukrainian. I always liked it, and I always felt like I was okay with languages at school. But there was always some feeling. Although I liked Ukrainian and Ukrainian literature, there was always this feeling in our region, like like if you speak Ukrainian, so you're just like lower class.
Well, I guess this is
Only now I started realizing this.
This is the legacy of colonialism. You're kind of led to believe that the language of Moscow is the language of civilization, and that the language of, the west of Ukraine is the language of the peasants, and
yeah, that's true.
How colonialism works. And you still have it in English as well, to some degree, where there's a lot of accent snobbery, there's a lot of prejudice directed towards certain accents. Sense of people from former colonies are still routinely mocked by people, and people make fun of them and kind of say, oh, it's a bad accent. And it's like, it's just a different accent. Just because you like the Queen or something, it doesn't mean you're less intelligent or that you're less
like proper English.
Yeah. But one final thing, I guess, for anyone watching who's wondering kind of what Maria was asking about earlier, which is, what can I do as a little person? Apart from doing what you're doing now, which is listening to Ukrainians tell their stories and their realities, I think that's a very important thing to do, is kind of listen to Ukrainian voices and follow Ukrainians on social media. Believe Ukrainians when they tell you what's happening in Ukraine.
At least believe your relatives or friends when they say something, because
I think it's a basic kind of requirement. Crimea was a gift to Ukraine. I'm going to find you and block you, because I haven't any further propaganda on my page. There's plenty enough spaces already spreading Russian propaganda. Like every other part of Ukraine, Crimea voted for independence in 1991.
Yes.
And was an independent part of Ukraine. I was in Crimea in 2011, 2012. It was part of Crimea, and everything was fully functioning there. There you go. Yeah, Alexander, thank you for the advice, mate. You're probably right. It becomes their conversation. Other things you can do, I think, is if you can, is donate to Ukrainian charities. I'll put some links in after this. There are plenty of things you can do. If you want to make the war end quicker, I would suggest donating to the Ukrainian Armed Forces myself. It's what I'm doing every month. You can also donate to other charities that maybe are non-military but provide support for Ukraine. You can be involved in the disinformation campaign. You can recognize that people like Vera, who troll these kinds of groups, are part of a hybrid war that's spreading disinformation and spreading kind of lies about what's happening with the war. And you can play your own part in trying to be part of that, because I think one other thing I've learned from the war is, and from Ukraine's resistance, is something one of my Ukrainian students said once, which is, if we all just do little things together, in the end, it makes a big difference. And there are no small donations.
That's true.
Every small action or every small donation becomes part of a bigger action and a bigger movement. And I think that's really important to remember and to bear in mind. Natalie, I feel like I've taken up quite enough of your time already. I'll save this onto the site. In Scotland, the issue of secession is being raised, but Russia doesn't interfere. And Russia does actually interfere, because Russia's highly involved in trying to create separatist movements all across Europe, as any Catalan or Scot will tell you. Take care of your own problems. I would say this to a Russian, Vera. Sort out your own problems, Russia.
Practice what you preach,
And on that note, I'll leave you. Thanks so much, Natalie, for your time.
For having me. I was really happy to talk with you. It's just so cool.
For your teaching. I forgot to ask, did you ever do TKT?
What?
Did you ever take the TKT?
No, unfortunately, I haven't, because for this I need to leave the country and do this outside the country, but I'm planning to do this winter, because it's September. I'm starting my Delta Model 1 preparation, And I hope that after I will be able to leave the country to take the exam and to pass the KT as well. So
Okay.
wish me luck.
Good luck. If I can help with, let me know and keep in touch. I've just seen a friend of mine from Kharkiv posting Roman. Hey Roman, hello. Yeah, miss you and miss Kharkiv and as always, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Yeah. Take care, Natalie. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.